While the best-known examples of hate online are websites maintained by hate groups, hate can be found in different forms all over the internet. In fact, 2/3 of young Canadians have seen hate content on YouTube, and 1/3 see it often or very often. 8 out of 10 young Canadians have seen it on Instagram. But how can you tell if something is hate content or not? For example, if you're doing research about a political issue or a historical event, how can you tell if a source is legitimate or if it's pushing hate propaganda? Pause for a minute to talk about that. One of the ways that hate groups and movements spread their message is through cloaked hate sites. These pretend to be legitimate sources of information or honest debate on topics like science, history, or current affairs. This quote is from a high school teacher whose students found one of these sites while doing research. If he had not recognized it for what it was, most of them would probably have believed it was a legitimate site and might have believed some of what it said. Even university students have fallen for these sites. Together, we're going to deconstruct an example of a cloaked hate site. That means we're going to analyze it to see how it might fool you and how you can recognize it for what it is. This site is called the Remembrance Project. What are some things that might make it look legitimate? What might make it look like a good source if you were doing research for an essay on immigration? Pause for a minute to talk about that. What are some things you noticed? It has a professional look and layout with lots of images and videos. It has no ads. The sections listed in the banner across the top show that it has lots of information about immigration. Hate groups and other people who spread bad information know what things make people think a website is reliable, so they try to make their sites look useful and professional. Sometimes a website from a legitimate university, non-profit, or even a government agency will look less professional because they don't always have the money to spend to keep it up to date. And of course, most legitimate newspapers have ads. This is the site's web address. Does that make it look more or less legitimate? Anyone can buy a .org address for their website, but hate groups and other people who spread bad information know that people think it means a site is reliable. The Remembrance Project is open about who they are when it comes to their board of directors and how to contact them. They know that makes them look more legitimate too. Hate groups try to get as many signs of legitimacy on cloaked websites as they can. This seal of transparency, for example, doesn't say anything about the content on the site. It just means they're open about where their money goes. Remember that to verify any information online, you can follow one or more of 4 steps. Use fact-checking tools, find the original source, verify the source, and check other sources. While fact-checking tools can be very useful to verify or debunk a particular claim on a website, they aren't the best way to find out if a whole website is reliable. It's also useful to find the original source of any facts or statistics you find on a website. For finding out if the whole website is reliable, though, the 2 steps that are most useful are verify the source and check other sources. We can verify this source by checking its entry on Wikipedia. That shows us that the Remembrance Project has been criticized for demonizing immigrants and supported a catch an illegal immigrant game on a university campus. To make sure the Wikipedia article is reliable, we can check its talk page. That shows us that while it's not a highly ranked article, mostly because it's very short, there's nothing identified as being wrong with it. There's been a conversation between editors about whether to include the criticisms of the site, but in the end they were left in. We can also check the revision history page. The fact that there have been only a few revisions in the last years shows that the content of the article is basically settled. Automated Wikipedia bots fix prank edits pretty quickly, so we can be sure that editors have looked at everything in the article. We can also check other sources by going to Google or another search engine and entering the group's name, in quotes is best, and then add their web address with a minus sign before it. That will keep the website itself from coming up in the search results. The results here are the same as Wikipedia. The Southern Poverty Law Center has a number of articles arguing that the Remembrance Project is an anti-immigrant hate site. But what if you're not sure you can trust what other people are saying about a site? What if there is no Wikipedia entry and no useful search engine results? A lot of Canadian websites won't have either of those. In that case, we need to look for the signs of a cloaked hate site: dishonest arguments, ideologies of hate, scapegoating, and dog whistling. There are three basic kinds of dishonest arguments: those that are dishonest about the facts, those that are dishonest about the issue, and those that are dishonest about the arguer. Pause for a few minutes to read the handout, Three Kinds of Dishonest Arguments. Then see which ones you can spot as we go along. Can you see an example of the naming your terms argument on this page? Pause for a minute to talk about it. Because illegal aliens is not the term used by the US or Canadian governments or nonprofit groups to describe immigrants who entered by irregular means, undocumented or unauthorized immigrant is generally used instead, anyone trying to verify their facts or statistics, such as by searching for a number of illegal aliens, will be more likely to find information that's hostile to immigrants. Cherry picking means giving just the facts that support one side of the argument and leaving out others. What are some examples of cherry picking in this graphic? Pause for a minute to see if you can spot them. No source is given for the statistics. For the purposes of the discussion, we'll assume they're accurate, but in general, if someone doesn't give you a source for statistics, you shouldn't believe them. They may have left the source off on purpose, hoping you'll do a search using their biased term. The purple bars look like they're supposed to represent fractions or percentages, but they're clearly meaningless. The bar for the second item is bigger than the one for the first, though the number in the top item is much higher. The different numbers are presented inconsistently to make undocumented immigration look like a bigger problem than it is. While the numbers in the first and second item are both in the millions, in the second item every digit is given, instead of 1.1m, to make it look bigger, both as an absolute number and as a proportion of the total. As well, while the first two items refer to undocumented immigrants in particular, the third item counts everyone who is not a U.S. citizen, mixing apples with oranges because it includes immigrants who entered legally but are not yet citizens. Undocumented immigrants are thought to be roughly a quarter of the non-citizen U.S. population. All of them leave out important data. For example, there are 328 million people in the U.S., which makes the top item automatically suspicious. Could 10% of the U.S. population really be undocumented immigrants? Turning to the last item, if we look up the total state and federal prison population in the U.S., we find it's roughly 1.5 million, meaning non-citizens make up just 5% of the total. If both statistics given here are correct, that means that non-citizens are half as likely as citizens to be in state or federal prison, exactly the opposite of what this graph is trying to make you believe. In fact, evidence suggests that both documented and undocumented immigrants are less likely than U.S.-born citizens to commit violent crimes, property crimes, and drug violations, with undocumented immigrants being least likely of the three groups. How does the Remembrance Project portray itself as a persecuted genius? Pause for a minute to read this and talk about it. Quote, "Killings of Americans, which the organization is trying to tell people about, are said to be ignored because many in the media seem not to care. As well, it's up to us to spread the truth suggests that some force, maybe the most politicians and many in the media mentioned above, is trying to suppress the truth." Another way to spot cloaked hate sites is to learn to recognize ideologies of hate. Ideas, symbols, and tropes that are used to play on your emotions and get you to agree with them. These aren't usually found in legitimate discourse and are a big red flag that something might be hate content. Take a look at the handout Ideologies of Hate and then see which ones you can spot on the site. How does this graphic make us see undocumented immigrants as others? Pause for a second to read the text and talk about it. What did you spot? The term alien instead of immigrant is othering because it makes us think of immigrants as inhuman. The list of violent acts allegedly committed, again without a source, by undocumented immigrants makes them seem uniformly violent and dangerous. In the headlines, each of the victims is described as an individual, convenience store worker, 70-year-old man, etc., and one is even named, while the alleged perpetrators are all simply described as illegal aliens. This has a powerful othering effect. If they are all alike and they are dangerous, then they are all dangerous. How does the site suggest that undocumented immigrants are in league with secret enemies? Pause for a minute and talk about it. Undocumented immigrants are supposedly benefiting from an app created by, quote, an open borders group, unnamed to make it seem more secretive. The group, and therefore the app, have received U.S. taxpayer dollars, suggesting that the reader, through their tax dollars, is responsible for the app without even knowing it, an example of sheep or asleep imagery. The group was also funded by left-wing billionaire George Soros. If you're not sure what that means, left-wing is a political term that refers to people who are more liberal, while right-wing means people who are more conservative. While in Canada immigration isn't usually a political issue, in the United States people on the left tend to be more in favor of immigration, and people on the right tend to be opposed to it. While that doesn't mean that any criticism or debate about immigration is automatically hate speech, it does mean that anti-immigrant hate groups are more likely to use terms and ideas aimed at conservative readers. In this case, saying that a left-wing billionaire funded the group is a way of telling conservatives that they're under attack by a powerful, secret enemy. How is Mr. Soros an example of a secret enemy? Pause for a few minutes to read the text and talk about it. This is an example of the puppet master version of the secret enemy. If a hate group wants you to think a group is dangerous but also primitive or unintelligent, they'll usually tell you that group is being manipulated by another smarter enemy. Here, the puppet master is supposedly pushing for open borders, racial disharmony, black separationists, Black Lives Matter, which is portrayed negatively by association, while being opposed to immigration enforcement, capitalism, the integrity of the nation's electoral systems, and counterterrorism. By suggesting that illegal immigration is supported by a master manipulator, the group makes sure that no matter how strictly immigration laws are enforced, they'll always have an enemy to fight. Scapegoating means throwing blame for a problem on a single person or group so that the larger group doesn't have to accept responsibility for it. One of the reasons why people engage in scapegoating is because having someone else to blame can strengthen your group identity. Based on what you've seen so far, how does this site use scapegoating to strengthen group identity? Why would the site emphasize the fact that these people were killed on Super Bowl Sunday? Pause for a minute to talk about it. This is one of the most significant days in the American calendar. The Super Bowl broadcast has the most expensive ads in all of U.S. television. Focusing on this fact positions the victims as real Americans and reinforces the us versus them message. Another reason why people engage in scapegoating is so they can blame someone else for a problem they don't want to face or fix. Based on what you've seen so far, how does this site use scapegoating to do that? Just under half of the people memorialized as stolen lives were killed in car accidents. While their deaths are undeniably tragic, unless there's evidence that undocumented immigrants are more likely to cause car accidents than other U.S. residents, evidence the site doesn't provide, it seems likely the real danger is not immigrants, but cars. While hate groups and people promoting hate do usually believe some or all of what they say, most of them are out to make money from it as well. Scapegoating can be a financial benefit because they can get people to donate money or buy things that defend their group against the enemy. Based on what you've seen so far, is this group benefiting financially from promoting hate? While this group is not as focused on making money as some, they don't sell books, t-shirts, hats, or supplements, and they don't charge large fees for public appearances, they definitely draw your attention to the donate button, putting a box around it and a red rectangle behind it so that it stands out compared to the other headers in the banner. Hate groups send out messages at 3 levels, ones that seem basically reasonable but a bit edgy or controversial to get more sympathizers, ones that are more extreme to turn sympathizers into members of their group or movement, and ones that give their true beliefs to turn members into activists who are willing to do violent or illegal things. Sometimes messages aimed at a lower level of the pyramid include something that only people at a higher level will recognize. That's called dog whistling, because it's like blowing a whistle that only dogs can hear. That way, if someone who's already higher up the pyramid sees something aimed at people lower down, it'll feel like they have special knowledge others don't, like they're part of an inside joke. Did you spot any examples of dog whistling in what you've seen so far? Pause for a minute and talk about it. Hate groups often use the word globalist to refer to Jewish people, so that people won't see that their message is anti-Semitic, hateful towards Jewish people, but their members will know what they mean. We saw this text before when discussing the hidden enemy ideology. The word globalist is a dog whistle for Jewish. Recognizing dog whistling is one of the most reliable ways that we can tell the true nature of a group like this that is trying to seem less hateful than it is, or a cloaked hate site like this one. So what can you do when you spot a cloaked hate site or more extreme forms of hate online? Just being able to recognize it helps a lot because it means you won't be fooled by it. Remember, a lot of these sites are made for you to find when you're doing research for school or about something you're interested in. Knowing that these sites aren't worth your attention will save you time, and you can warn your friends about them as well. But there is more that you can do. Take a look at the tip sheets How to Report Hate Online and How to Push Back Against Hate Online to find out how we can all work together to make the internet free from hate. This lesson was developed by MediaSmarts, Canada's Centre for Digital Media Literacy. For more free MediaSmarts resources, visit mediasmarts.ca.